Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today we'll be taking a look at a game played in the 2024 the Vugar Gashimov Memorial. So this tournament is actually right after the 2024 Olympiad, which have just ended very recently, just a few days ago. And this tournament, you can see that, like, by looking at its homepage, it doesn't really contain any, like, a lot of details, no pictures or everything, only the most like important ones, like the location, the time control. So this tournament is held in Azerbaijan, and the time control, so actually this is rapid and blitz. So there are two types of time controls. The first one is 15 minutes plus 10 seconds each move increment, and another one is 3 minutes plus 2 seconds each move. And today we'll be taking a look at a game played by Abdusattorov Nodirbek. So he is from Uzbekistan. Now this game is played by him, and actually just a few days ago, some subscribers from Uzbekistan reminded me that to go over some games played by Uzbekistan players. So today I'm going to go over one of the games played by Uzbekistan players. So Nodirbek is actually a super young and good-looking player. He's really one of Uzbekistan's rising stars. He is actually one of the strongest. He even won the World Rapid Championship, beating none other than the world's strongest player, Magnus Carlsen. And that's actually when chess fans in China started to notice him, because before that point, he is really not so known in China. Like, most of us don't know him, but after he won the game against Magnus Carlsen, we started to notice him. So he is actually super good looking, and my chess buddy, who is a girl, is actually totally obsessed with him because of that. But honestly, what's most impressive about him is his chess skills and on the international stage. And today we'll be taking a look at one of his games played in this tournament. So he is white, and he is facing a grandmaster from India who is rated 2500, and let's see how he did in this game. So he started with d4, and his opponent played knight f6, knight f3, and g6. And after bishop f4, this is the London system. So you can see that white is developing all of his pieces in the way that when you're playing a London system, like the way that you should develop in a London system. And in the game, his opponent played the King's Indian defense. So after c3, now d6. But actually, this is not the most typical King's Indian defense, because white is not playing the way when white faces the King's Indian defense should be. So actually, in the King's India, most of the times, white just goes c4 instead of c3, and then just developing this way with knight c3, e4, going pretty aggressive. But in the game instead, white is developing in a more solid way. So knight bd2, knight h5, kicking this bishop, and now the bishop goes to bishop g5. So actually, you might be wondering, why does the bishop have to move twice? And actually, 3 times, because black can now go h6 to kick this bishop. So the reason for that is actually, so first of all, let's just see. Bishop f4 is actually, a really, a really normal move, just developing your bishop. So after knight h5, the reason that the bishop just not goes back to e3, well, actually going back to e3 is not good, because it blocks this e2 pawn, which means that this bishop is it has to develop this way. But in the future, it will be really hard for white to gain space in the center by pushing e4, which means that this bishop can only go to g5 or g3. But if you go to g3 here, then black will just happily take, and after, let's say, h takes g5, not only does black have the bishop pair, but also that you can see that white's pawn structure is slightly damaged on the king side, and you can see that black has this dark square bishop. On the other hand, white has just have traded the dark square bishop, which means that in the future there's a good chance for black to go c5 to activate this bishop. So and there's no way for white to really trade this bishop off. So this is the main problem for white. So let's see what happened in the game. Bishop g5 was played. So luring black to play h6, because now if you go h6, which was played in the game, you can just go back to bishop h4, and after g5, then bishop g3. The main difference of here going bishop g3 immediately is here comparing. Black has now pushed the pawns on the king side. So even though it might look a little bit aggressive, but actually it somehow weakens, especially these light squares. And also in the future, there's h4 ideas for white to open up on the king side. So I'm not sure if pushing h6 and then going g5 is a good idea for black. But here, still the position is okay for both sides. It is pretty much equalized. So let's see how this game went on. Knight d7 was played, just developing, but probably bishop f5 is better because you want to develop your bishop first and then go knight d7. Because if you play knight d7 immediately as played in the game, you will block this bishop. So that is the main difference. e4 was played, very logical, just gaining space in the center and developing. e6, and now bishop d3. So you can see that actually this knight on h5 is a little bit misplaced. The only option for it is to probably take the bishop in the next few moves, because if it just goes back to f6, that's just losing a move. So, but you can see that actually I think in this position, most of us would be in white's favor, because you can see that, look at white's pieces. They're all pretty much developed. And for black, the bishop, especially the light square bishop on c8, is kind of passive. And for black, it's not that easy to play here because white also has a great space advantage in the center. So after bishop d3, b6 was played. So black's idea here is actually to develop the bishop with b6 and bishop b7, which is probably okay, but instead probably a better option would be to go bishop f5 here, But anyways, in the game, b6 was played, and Nodirbek here played knight to g1, which is actually a mistake, but it's actually really logical. And so white's idea here is with knight g1 is actually to open up this diagonal for the queen to attack the knight, forcing the knight to take g3. Because of course you don't want to go back. If you go back, you're just wasting a move. So which means that Nodirbek is here forcing black to take on g3. And actually it's pretty reasonable, because this knight on h5 is somehow really annoying, because sometimes it can even jump to f4 at some point. But here actually there's no need to worry about this knight. White should just, develop with queen e2 and then probably even long castle. Black in the end will have to take on g3. If black goes knight f4 instead, then probably will take with bishop f4, g takes f4, and g3 to open up on the king side. And you can see that black cannot castle short side because this is just too dangerous for him. But on the other hand, it will take a lot of moves for him to castle queen side, which means that by that time, black had got all the pieces out of the way and preparing for a long castle, white will already launch a deadly attack on the king side. So probably that is a better idea to go queen e2, but instead Nodirbek here played knight to g1, which is okay, I guess, but not the best. So knight g3 was played. If you go knight f4 here in this position, which is actually not good, you after bishop f4, you'll just actually be a little bit down here, because after knight e2, this pawn is actually really weak. And if you go e5, which is the only way to defend it, you can now go g3, and this pawn has to somehow take, let's say f takes g3, but after h takes g3, let's say bishop b7 for example, now you can see that this h file is open to white's rook. This h6 pawn is a huge weakness, and white is preparing for queen c2 or queen b3 and going long castle. So this is just a very comfortable position for white to play. So in the game, knight g3 was played, and after h takes g3, of course you're taking with the h pawn to open up the h file, bishop b7 developing, knight e2, queen e7, now g4. Now g4 is actually a really important move here because you're fixing black's pawn structures. You're not allowing black to go h5, because if you go, for example, like queen c2 here just developing, black will probably go h5 in this situation and push h4 to trying to trade, because h6 pawn was a weakness. So here black is trying to get rid of this weakness by trading it off and creating some counterplay on the king side. So of course, if you're white, you don't want to allow that, so you just fix the pawn structure and this fix this weakness on h6, and it will be a winning idea for white in the future. So c5 was played in the game, knight f1. So actually here already Nodirbek is kind of messing up in this position, because probably he should have just developed with queen a4 and then go long castle. The main problem for him is that now actually black's king is really safe on e8, whereas white needs to develop the queen as well as this rook on a1 with long castle, but he is not doing that, and instead he is just jumping around with his knight. Probably his idea is to go knight g3, knight h5, but it's too slow, and probably knight e3. But what he should have done instead is to go queen a4 and then long castle, and then just to slowly but surely create counterplay in the center. But after knight f1 in the game, his opponent actually, unfortunately, here made a mistake with a6. Now, giving all the advantage back to white. a6 idea is probably to go b5, but he missed this idea with knight fg3, which was not played in the game. Knight fg3 going for the h5 square. So let's say if black goes d5, trying to gain some space in the center, white will go e5 actually here. And after long castle, probably knight h5, kicking this bishop, and if this bishop goes back, now we can actually go first of all short castle and then f4 ideas. Alright, so let's go back here. So a6 is actually sort of wasting a move here. Instead, he should have just go, for example, long castle to keep on developing, or go d5. But in the game, he didn't do that, and Nodirbek here played knight e3, which is also one of the best moves, b5. So yeah, I guess black's idea is to go b5, but here that is the wrong idea. a4, because it is giving white some chances to create counterplay. Before, white needs to push a4, a5 to do so, to open up some files. But here after b5, white just needs to go a4 to open up files on the queen side, and there's nothing black can do about it. In the game, b4 was played. Of course, you don't want to take on a4, because if you take with b takes a4, this a6 pawn will be a forever weakness. So after queen takes a4, this pawn will lose immediately, especially in the endgame. So after b4, a5 was played, so fixing the pawn on a6. So you can see that Nodirbek here is actually fixing two weaknesses. This is actually a bigger weakness because it is open to the rook. This pawn is being pressured by the bishop, but still, it's actually not that easy for white to get all the pieces to attack it. But anyways, so in the game, you can see that already black is in some trouble here, even though the eval bar still says it's close to equal, but you can see that black's pieces are sort of cramped inside. a5 controls the b6 square, not allowing black to go knight b6, and black doesn't really have a good idea here. In the game, he played short castle, and Nodirbek played short castle as well. Finally, both sides got their king to safety. Rook fc8, d5, closing up the center. So now you can see that this bishop is completely locked inside, and probably now white's idea is to go f4 later on. So in the game, knight e5 was played. Of course, you don't want to go e5 if you're black, because if you go e5, this f5 square will be completely open to white's knight, and that will be an excellent outpost for the knights. In the game, knight e5 was played, attacking the d3 bishop, and after bishop c2, because you don't really want to let black to trade this bishop off, because this bishop is pretty useful. It can not only put pressure on this a6 pawn, but it can also go back and go to this a4 diagonal to keep to still stay active. Oops, spoiler alert. Oops. But anyways, so in the game, bishop c2 was played, and here rook a b8 was played. And after c takes b4, bishop a8. Now bishop a8 is actually kind of unnecessary here. What black should have played here is actually, okay, if you want to take on b4, it is not the best move actually, because there's d takes e6, and after f takes e6, the main problem is that white can now go bishop b3 to put pressure on these two pawns. But what what black can do here is actually to go rook d8, which is actually a very good move. Because now if you like take on e6, now there's f takes e6, and if you still go bishop b3, now the main problem is that there's bishop takes e4. And if you go, actually there's a really tricky move here, which is to go knight f5. If you go bishop takes f5, you can now take g takes f5, but the main problem is that now black can go c4. Because he hasn't traded the pawn, like he hasn't taken on b4 yet, so he still has the c4 idea. So that's the main big difference. But in the game, bishop a8 was played, giving white now some chances to increase his advantage. In the game, b takes c5 was played, and after rook takes c5, now actually these are all inaccuracies played by black. Here he should have taken with the pawn, but probably what he was scared of was like maybe d6 ideas. I don't know, or maybe he thought that there was like some, I don't know, b3 ideas to fix this pawn on c5 and then go knight c4. So actually maybe black is losing some ideas here. Maybe he thought that this bishop was too passive and this a6 pawn is also too weak. Alright, so let's go back to the game. Rook c5 was played, but now it gives white a lot of chances. In the game, Nodirbek played the best move, which is bishop b3, to put pressure on the e6 pawn as well as supporting d5. And in the game here, black made another mistake and played rook b4. Now, actually, after rook b4, white is already winning. So you can see that just by looking at the eval bar, actually, white already has a huge advantage. But the only move here to increase this advantage or still preserve this advantage is to go d takes e6. And that was actually founded by Nodirbek in the game. But if he had played something like, I don't know, if he played something like rook c1, just very normal, going for this open f file, c file, and trading the rooks, now probably black will just ignore you and go king to h7. First of all, running away from this pin, and probably black will be okay here. But in the game, the main problem is that there is d takes e6, and after f takes e6, now the main problem is that there's knight f5. And what is causing all of these chaos is because this king is being pinned by this bishop. The pawn cannot move. This king is also like in great danger. Here, if the king were on h7 or h8 instead, then black will be able to take on f5, but unfortunately the king and the pawn are being pinned, so there's no way for black to really like save this position. Black tried with queen d7, but after knight e d4, probably not the best move. He should have just taken on g7, and after king takes g7, there's knight d4. This pawn is simply just dead. But in the game, knight e d4 was played, which is also okay, and after d5, but actually d5 loses on the spot. After knight g7, king takes g7, and queen d2, another best move played by Nodirbek. And actually, it's not an easy move to see because most of the times you're just thinking to take and take, like to trade pieces. But sometimes when you're gaining a lot of advantage, a quiet move is sometimes the best winning method. And here, queen d2 is a quiet move. And after rook b8 back, and after rook ac1, not the best way to win this cleanly, but f4 is the better option here. But rook c1 is also winning. After rook takes c1, king g8 back, because now white is actually threatening to go rook c7 if black were to take. There's knight e6 forking the king and the queen, so that is a deadly threat. And then the game king g8 was played, and after queen e3, knight f7, e5, rook c8, rook e1, bishop c6, queen d3, knight d8, and black is basically just like all of his pieces are trapped inside. There's just too many weaknesses, a6, e6, h6. They are all going to be gobbled up by white's queen. First of all, Nodirbek took the a6 pawn, and after rook b8, queen back, and after bishop b5, knight takes, queen g6, I'm coming for the h6 pawn. But of course, you can also just go rook e3 here, threatening to go rook f3, which is gonna be mate. So after knight f7 and after rook f3 here, black resigned because there's just no way to stop all of these threats. So let's say if black goes back to queen d7 here, protecting this knight, but now white will just take on h6. So first of all, you can see that white is already up 3 pawns, and that is just way too much. So Hope you guys enjoyed this game. It was well played by Nodirbek, even though it was a rapid game, not a classical game. So, like this game, the quality of this game may not be like as high as some classical games played by top grandmasters, but still, we can see that how he won this game cleanly. He found this queen d2, which is a quiet move, and he didn't make any huge mistakes in this game. Only this knight g1, which is a slight mistake, but it doesn't really matter. At the end, he won the game. So actually in this game, he had a 91.6 accuracy, so that is also pretty high, especially when you're playing in a rapid game. So you can see that he is a very strong player from Uzbekistan, and probably in the future he'll play more fascinating games. Alright, so hope you guys enjoyed this game, and if you like my videos, please comment down below to tell me, and please subscribe. See you in the next video. Bye!